Okay, so welcome to my presentation on the film Up in the Air and Person-Centered Messages. I'm Alec John Vash. So the first thing that we want to talk about in this presentation is person-centered messages. Person-centered messages are messages that are tailored to the individual given the context, and these become a lot more common as you start getting into more forms of complex communication where we have nonverbal emotions being shown, and things that really take a lot of context and understanding to adapt to the situation and see how you are going to reply to that and what you are going to say that can affect that situation. And there's three different types of person-centered messages that we can choose from if we're going to choose the route of taking a person-centered message. So the first one is a highly person-centered message, and these are ones that acknowledge, elaborate on, and validate the feelings and concerns of the distressed person, and these are especially comforting. So these ones, like the definition says, if you are dealing with a distressed person, you would tell them that you understand where they're coming from, and you're going to continue to push that type of speaking with them and help them get through it. So this is not necessarily like a practice, but a specific message that uses this mindset would be a highly person-centered message. And the example would be just like what I was saying I'd be frustrated to get a C too, especially if I studied hard and was as smart as you are. I bet you'll figure out how to do better next time. So that one is highly person-centered. Next, we have moderately person-centered messages, and these acknowledge the distressed person's feelings, but these don't go the extra step that the highly person-centered messages do to actually try to push forward that emotion and go through and actually, to effectuate that feeling more personally, right? So it would look something like, I'll bet the test was hard, so you shouldn't feel so bad. Like, acknowledges that the feeling or acknowledges the situation, but doesn't necessarily contextualize the feeling on a super personal level, right? And then on the bottom echelon, we have low person-centered messages, which implicitly or explicitly deny the legitimacy of the distressed person's feelings. So these are things that denounce what they're saying, like get over it, or what's the big deal, right? And as in the example, it's only one test, so don't make such a big deal, right? So these are three types of person-centered messages, and they're situational. So maybe if you're just with your friend and you know that they're not very upset, you can use a low person-centered message if it's easier, but you shouldn't be using a low person-centered message if someone's like visually and visibly like very, very distraught or traumatized. Then we should really try to be comforting with our nonverbals as well as use highly person-centered messages, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind. It's not only highly person-centered messages. A lot of other things come in play during these complex communication process, but these are just one element. So the movie Up in the Air is about this guy played by George Clooney, and Anna Kendrick is like his friend. They both work at the same place, and they go and they fire people. This is in like 2009 after the recession. So a lot of companies have too many workers. So what they have to do is fire a bunch of them, but they're too afraid to do that. So they hire George Clooney's character and Anna Kendrick's character, Natalie Keeter, and George Clooney's character, Ryan Bingham, to fire the employees for them. So let's watch this clip. Oh, okay. It's
here today.
Ready and
change the world set where you are right now. And it's because they sat there, they were able to do it. That's the truth.
That's the truth. Let's move on to the next clip. Right.
What do you suggest I tell them?
Perhaps you're underestimating the positive effect that your career transition can have on your children.
The positive effect? I make about 90 grand a year now. Employment is what, $250 a week? Is that one of your positive effects? Well, we'll get to be cozier because I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage on my house, so maybe we can move into a nice fucking one-bedroom apartment somewhere. And I guess without benefits, I'll be able to hold my daughter as she, suffers from her asthma that I won't be able to afford the medication for.
Well, tests have shown that children under moderate trauma have a tendency to apply themselves academically as a method of coping.
Go fuck yourself. That's what my kids will think.
Your children's admiration is important to you?
Yeah, it was.
Well, I doubt they ever admired you, Bob.
Hey, asshole, aren't you supposed to be consoling me?
I'm not a shrink, Bob. I'm a wake-up call. You know why kids love athletes?
I don't know, because they screw lingerie models.
No, that's why we love athletes. Kids love athletes because they follow their dreams. How much did they first pay you to give up on your dreams?
27 grand a year.
And when were you going to stop and come back and do what makes you happy?
Good question.
I see guys who work at the same company for their entire lives, guys exactly like you. They clock in, they clock out, and they never have a moment of happiness. You have an opportunity here, Bob. This is a rebirth. Now, if not for you, do it for your children.
Okay, so that is the end of that clip. This is my presentation. So, did you guys notice any person-centered messages throughout that clip? So one little note while you guys are trying to think about it, or maybe go and Google in the video to rewatch it. I'll let you know that as I was speaking before the video, not everything that they said was necessarily a person-centered message, right? But as I will tell you, there were many person-centered messages sprinkled within throughout, and it gets the point across of what we're trying to talk about when we're talking about how he was, even though some of the stuff he was saying to J.K. Simmons seemed a little off-putting, it was still person-centered, which makes it really, really cool to show that person-centered messages don't always have to be like things that sound like, you're kissing their butt, like, oh, like I'm here for you. You can still be person-centered while having a stern demeanor and take in being serious. So I think that that's a good note to get from this clip specifically. So moving on to finish my presentation, these are the examples I took and a little explanation for each one. So obviously the low person-centered messages were coming out of Anna Kendrick, Natalie Keeter's character. And as you can see, the physical manifestation of that was that he was becoming more upset the more she talked. So let's go over what she said, because she only had 2 lines in this, and they were both low person-centered messages. So she says, first, perhaps you're forgetting the positive effects that may come with this transition. So these don't appeal to the feelings, brings up something not directly related to him in the moment. And given that this is such a big moment for him that he's just gone through, we see that she does not really acknowledge that. So we think that this is like low person-centered. She's just talking about the act itself. So then she says, after he says that, well, what would my kids do if I don't have money? She says, well, mild trauma leads to academic achievement as a coping method, right? And I think that that's pretty actually insensitive to say, but is definitely not low person-centered. You can argue it is moderately person-centered because it does acknowledge that there will be trauma, which is acknowledging of a feeling, even though that she's not really delving into it to make it a highly person-centered messages. I would vouch for it being moderately person-centered. Now moving on to the highly person-centered messages as given by George Clooney, aka Brian Bingham, we see that she says, do you want your children to admire you? He says, this is something personal that, right? So he says, do you want your children to admire me? So this is something personal and on a personal level with Bob, the character. And this is something that mentions something important to the message recipient. So not the most person-centered, but it does a job of acknowledging Bob as a person So this sets up to the whole children thing and him talking about his children. And even though it's not so direct, it still is more related to his person and acknowledging him than what Anna Kendrick was saying. Finally, like I would say the most person-centered message is more of a question. He asked, how much did they pay you to give up on your dream? So as the definition of like person-centered messages is they help the message recipient elaborate and contextualize on their situation so that they can move forward from there. So I think that Ryan Bingham's character does a good job of this. George Clooney's character does a good job of this, by really leading him to this question, like through this his own like path, of like his storytelling, that leads him to understand, well, at the end of the day, I do have like a credential to be a cook, and I can go live my dream and be something that my children could be proud of. So I think that just I mean, just given that they both spoke for, maybe George Clooney spoke for a few more seconds, but um, it was still within the same meeting, and the small difference in the words they said ended up having a huge impact on the way the person being fired was reacting to it. So, moral of the story: words are important. Person-centered messages are a crucial tool that should be utilized like expert communicators like y'all, right? So, I think that through this, we see that person-centered messages, though they're like just one of the many tools used in these complex communication exchanges, we still think that they ought be memorialized and remembered by people who are trying to be active communicators, because they are so important, as stated in, like, as shown through the video and as explained. Just like the slightest change in your tone of voice and the way that you acknowledge someone in distress can highly affect the way that they're experiencing distress, right? So I think the next time, like, if I leave you with one thing, it's like, I want next time that you talk to someone in distress, just think like, how would I want someone to talk to me if I was in that like position, like whether it's like embarrassing or not, like how would you want someone to treat you, right? That's pretty lame way to do it. But still, think about the difference between high person-centered message, moderately person-centered message, low person-centered message, and when to use each one. Thank you. Okay, stop the share. Oh, stop recording.